In this video, we'll show you how to install a purpose-built Rockford Fosgate audio system on this Harley-Davidson motorcycle. Welcome back. I'm Eric, and today we're going to install an HD14U-STAGE3 on this Electra Glide Ultra Classic. The first thing we need to do is make sure that we have the bike flashed by an authorized Rockford Fosgate dealer, which can be found on our website. We do this because the factory radio contains an excessive EQ curve. Now this is fine for a stock setup, but with the high performance aftermarket system, we need to get rid of it. This will allow you to experience the full potential of our audio system. We'll get started by removing the seat using a number 2 screwdriver and a 10mm socket to disconnect the battery negative. Now we're ready to remove the fairing. First, we'll install the service cover on the fender. Then we'll use a T27 Torx driver to remove 4 bolts on the inside and then 3 bolts that hold the visor in place. Now it's best to have 2 people to do this step. One holding the fairing in position and the other to remove the screws. Once we pull down on the fairing, we'll disconnect any harnesses and go ahead and remove it. Now we're ready to remove our speaker pods. We'll start by disconnecting the harnesses on top using a flathead screwdriver and a plastic removal tool. Then we'll use a 5/32 ball head Allen to remove 2 screws from each of the top of the pods. We'll move down and remove 3 bolts using a 7/16 socket with the swivel joint and extension. Now the brake side is difficult to get to, so we recommend detaching the lower harness panel with the number 1 Phillips to give you some extra space. Finally, we'll use a 3/16 Allen head to remove 3 screws from each of the pods. Now we're ready to remove our factory equipment and install our new speakers. As you could see, when we removed our speaker pods, there were some additional harnesses that we had to remove. Now the TMS65 speakers included in your kit contain extra grills for road glide and tour pack installs. For our batwing fairing, we're going to use this grill with the 3 tabs. We'll start by using a T25 Torx and remove 3 screws that hold the factory grill. We'll then use the same hardware to secure our new ones in place. Take note when installing that the logo will reside at the bottom. Use the same T25 to remove 4 screws from the speaker pod and install the new speaker with the logo toward the bottom as well. After that's done, we'll use a 3/16 Allen driver to secure the outer 3 screws and hold the pods in place. Before we move on to the next step, we'll go ahead and finish attaching our speaker pods and reattaching the wire harnesses, including the lower harness panel. Now once we're done with that, we'll start by prepping our amp bracket by removing these 2 harnesses on the top and carefully relocating the satellite antenna. Now we're ready to install our amp bracket. First, using a T25 Torx driver, we'll remove these top 4 screws, then we'll stick on 4 included standoffs over the holes. Now these are very important because it isolates the heat generated from the amplifier and prevents it from transferring to the other electronics. Then we'll position the bracket with the heatsink fins facing the front using the supplied hardware and a 3mm Allen driver. Secure the longer flush mount screws into the holes labeled 2014 Plus Street Glide. Now that we're done with that, we're ready to tune our amplifier and install it. We offer a free amp tuning guide that's available in the description of this video and through this kit's product details page at rockfordfosgate.com. Once we get the amplifier configured, we'll secure it to the amp bracket using a supplied hardware and a 2.5mm Allen driver. Before proceeding, be sure to remove the pre-installed power connector since our harness already has one. Now that we have that done, we're ready to remove the gas tank. We'll start off by disconnecting the electrical harness and pulling 2 breather lines that are located in the back. Note that they may be zip tied underneath. Next, we'll disconnect the gas line. We'll push up on the hose and while sliding the fitting upward, pull down on the gas line. Be sure to have a shop rag handy to catch any excess fuel that's left in the line. Once that's done, detach the 2 rubber boots from both sides of the front of the gas tank and use a 1/2-inch socket to remove 2 bolts. Then use the same socket to remove 2 bolts in the back. Now that we have access to the center channel, we're ready to install our power harness. First, cut any zip ties off and unsnap the center harness cover. Once that's done, we'll take the power connector side of our harness and run it up through the clutch side of the motorcycle. We'll then use a small Phillips driver to unscrew a plastic rivet that holds a retaining bracket in between the forks. We'll route our harness through this bracket and up to the amplifier. Make sure that you have enough slack to make your amplifier and battery connections. Simply plug in the power connector into the amplifier and plug the blue wire into the empty connector on the top of the brake side. This blue wire is also the amplifier remote turn-on. Take note that there is likely an empty plug that needs to be removed before making your connection. If this plug is occupied by another accessory, relocate the accessory item to pull power from another side of the motorcycle harness. Now that we're done with that, we're ready to install our Tour Pack speakers. To get started, we'll use a T10 Torx to remove 4 screws holding the grill and speaker in place. Detach the old speaker, noting the positive and negative connections. On the new speaker, we'll detach the grill from the trim ring and connect the speaker and secure the assembly in place using the existing hardware. Once that's done, we'll reattach the grill in place with the Rockford Fosgate logo toward the bottom. Now we're ready to install our T-harness. First, we'll disconnect the main harness from the back of the factory source unit. Push the little catch pin in that locks the harness into place and slide the lever open. Plug this end into the female end of our T-harness and lock it into place. Then, plug the male end of our harness into the source unit and slide the lever until you hear it click. Take the harness labeled amp input and connect them to the corresponding input jacks on the amplifier. Then take the harness labeled amp output and connect the front to the corresponding front amp output for the fairing speakers and the rear to the corresponding rear amp output for the tour pack speakers. Now, since we're not using the blue remote wire from the T-harness, we'll just zip tie that out of the way. Now that we're done with that, we're ready to install our bag lid speakers. Since this motorcycle has a tour pack, we'll remove the bag lids by unscrewing the 2 quick release pins on the inside. Removing the bag lids will give us plenty of room during the cutting process. Alright, we're ready to prepare our bag lids for speaker installation. Now, we designed this template that's included in the kit to assist you in making the perfect cut. To get started, we'll use 3M painter's tape to cover the top of the bag lid so we don't scratch the paint. Next, we'll position our template on top, making sure the front lip of the template is sitting firmly against the ridge of the bag lid. Push on the corner, front, and top of the template to make sure it's properly positioned with no play on the lid. Then, mark 2 pilot holes on top. Remove the template and use a 1/8 inch drill bit to pre-drill the holes. Then secure the template in place using a number 2 Phillips and the small screws provided in the kit. With our new template, it no longer requires you to remove any of the bag lid hardware. Now that we have that done, we'll use a 5/16 bit to drill our pilot holes. Using a jigsaw with a fine-tooth blade, follow along the template while staying within the guides. To maintain accuracy, do not cut the segments of the template until all the slots have been cut. Cutting into the template will lead to fitment issues, especially at the corners. Now, a wise installer once showed me a trick to use a bin liner inside the bag to catch all the debris. This will keep the interior nice and clean. Once we're done, we'll repeat the process on the other side. Now that we have that done, we're ready to install our speakers. We went ahead and cleaned up our cutouts, making sure there were no burrs around the edges to test fit our grill. First, we'll open the bag lid, then position the mounting ring and grill in place to make sure that they are properly aligned. The grill goes on the outside and the mounting ring on the inside. This is where we'll sandwich them together to the bag lid. Using a number 2 Phillips, secure 4 of the smaller screws supplied in the kit. Be careful not to over tighten these. Once that's done, we'll align the speaker and basket protector assembly with the speaker terminals toward the rear of the bike. Then we'll secure it to the mounting ring from the inside using 4 long button head screws with the built-in washer. Now that we have our speakers installed, we're ready to lay out our bag lid harness. First, route the harness up through the same retaining bracket we originally used for our power wire. Pull the harness up to the amplifier to verify there's enough slack for connection to the amp's rear output. We've provided a Y adapter to split the rear output between the tour pack and the bag lids. Route the opposite ends of the harness through the center channel and rest them near the battery. Now we're ready to route our harness to our bag lids. We'll remove both service panels so we can run our harnesses under the seat frame to the rear bag area. Take the harness labeled brake side and route it through the service panel and exit toward the rear shock. On the clutch side, we'll use a 1/2 inch socket to slightly pull out the fuse panel and route our harness toward the rear belt. Now that we have our harness laid out, we're ready to drill holes into the bags. We're measuring approximately 3 inches down from the front of the bag's quick release. On our motorcycle, it ensures that the harness is kept away from any moving parts. Now, on your bike, this may vary slightly based on the belt on the clutch side and the brake calipers on the right side. We'll need a 3/4 inch diameter hole for installation of the grommet. To get the hole started, we'll be using a drill bit, then switching to a step-up bit to increase the hole size to the appropriate diameter. Now we're ready to wire our bag lids. To get started, we'll position our bag in place and insert the grommet into the 3/4 inch hole. Once you have the grommet seated, finish securing the bag into place. Once that's done, use the pigtail harness included in the kit and connect the red wire to the positive terminal, that's indicated with the red dot, and the black wire to the negative terminal. Then, plug the pigtail into the main harness. Now, we've included zip ties, zip tie mounts, and retainer clips to keep your wiring out of the way and inside the bag. We've also included some replacement warning stickers for installation inside. Now that we have all that done, we're ready to make our battery connections. We use a 1/2 inch socket to remove 2 screws that hold the engine control module in place. We'll disconnect a couple harnesses and flip the ECM tray up to make our positive terminal connection. Then we'll reconnect our negative cable with our amp ground. Once that's done, we'll put everything back in place. Now that we have that done, let's clean up our wiring and reassemble the bike. You'll notice there are some additional adapters that come with your kit. The second Y adapter allows you to add 2 more speakers onto the front, just like we did for the rear channels. There's also an extra bracket, hardware, and bypass plugs that are not used on this motorcycle, but are covered in other videos. The last harness supplied in the kit interfaces with our T-harness. This allows you to add our optional DSR1 digital signal processor. For more information, download our DSR1 setup guide for Harley-Davidson. And keep an eye out for our complete configuration video that we'll be releasing in the future. All right, now that we have the bike reassembled, we're ready to test the system. I want to reiterate, before doing this, make sure that the factory radio is flashed. Now we get a lot of questions about the maintenance of the system, and since the speakers are element ready, they can get wet. Just avoid using a pressure washer. Instead, simply rinsing them off will suffice. As you can see, that install is pretty straightforward. If you prefer to have a professional do the install for you, we have a network of authorized Rockford Fosgate dealers that can be found on our website. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact our technical support. They can be reached Monday through Friday at 1-800-669-9899 or through live chat at the bottom of our website at rockfordfosgate.com. Until next time, I'm Eric. We'll see you again soon.